I am proud to announce that City Hall's partnership with the MTA will extend to the Joint Thermal Energy Network feasibility study in the adjacent Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station. So we are actually aiming to confirm the geothermal feasibility by the end of this calendar year. And if it is found that it can be implemented, then the design work would begin early next year.
This morning, turning subway heat into energy. The MTA and the city are looking into what could become the very first thermal energy network ever used in a transit system in the United States.
Today on California Reports, New York City just made a promise that sounds like science fiction. Not will cool the subway. Something stranger. Picture this. It's August in Lower Manhattan. You're standing on the platform at Brooklyn Bridge City Hall, waiting for the 4 train. It's 96 degrees down here, on average all summer, not on the worst day. On average, some platforms in this system run 20 degrees hotter than the street above them.
It's very hot out here, so I'm not comfortable at all.
We started in Midtown at the 34th Street Herald Square station, where around 4 o'clock Monday, the heat was already on. Our handheld thermometer clocking in at over 90 degrees. Still, it was comfortable enough for some.
It's been worse. It's been a lot worse. So, yeah, it's not, I don't think it's that bad.
So when Mayor Zohran Mamdani, Governor Kathy Hochul, and the MTA stood at this exact station this week and announced a plan to fix it, everyone assumed the same thing. Finally, air conditioning. That is not the plan. The plan is to capture the heat, store it underground, and use it to warm city buildings when winter comes. Wait, they're not just trying to get the heat out of the subway, they're trying to put it to work.
Anyone who has stood on a subway platform in August knows that our stations do not just get hot, they turn into underground saunas. And if you, like me, do not know what a summer suit is and choose instead to commute in a wool one, let me tell you, it is far from a therapeutic experience. During the summer, the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station becomes one of the hottest stations in New York City.
And buried in this announcement is a detail that changes how you should look at the whole thing. Officials are calling this the first thermal energy network ever built inside a U.S. transit system, except this exact technology is already running 2 blocks away, heating St. Patrick's Cathedral and the New York Botanical Garden. So if the technology already exists, what exactly is New York claiming credit for? That question is where this story actually starts.
This technology has never been tested before in a transit system here in this country, but it is being used elsewhere in the city, like at St. Patrick's Cathedral, they're using it, and also at the New York Botanical Garden. And it's also being used in Canada and in Europe. We're excited because it could be a real win-win.
Here's what actually happened. On August 10th, in front of cameras at the Chambers Street JZ station, one of the oldest, most beat-up stops in the entire system, Hochul, Mamdani, and MTA Chair Janno Lieber announced a joint study. Not a construction project. A study. They want to know if a thermal energy network, or TEN, can do 2 things at the connected Brooklyn Bridge City Hall and Chambers Street complex. Pull heat off the platforms in summer and push that heat into nearby municipal buildings in winter.
I'm Janno Lieber, MTA Chair and CEO, and I want to welcome Mayor Mamdani to one of the most historic and notorious stations in the subway system, which is the Chambers Street station on the JZ. Anyone can see that this place is long overdue for a full renovation, and there are literally stalactites hanging from the ceiling.
Why here? Because Chambers Street was already getting a top-to-bottom renovation funded by congestion pricing. And because Brooklyn Bridge City Hall happens to be one of the hottest stations on the map, so why not just install air conditioning like every office building in Manhattan? Because a subway station isn't sealed. It has open staircases, open entrances, vents pouring in every direction. Cooling that space is like running your AC with every window in the house open, all day, every day.
But bringing down temperature is a really complex challenge in a system where the stations are 100 years old and they have open entrances, stairways, vents. As I always say, the subway is not a submarine. It's not an enclosed environment, and air comes in and out. Now, the best way to combat the experience of excessive heat is with fast and reliable train service.
Worse, every train that pulls in dumps heat. The air conditioners keeping you cool inside the car are blasting hot exhaust straight into the tunnel and onto the platform. That heat has to go somewhere. For a century, it just went into the walls, into the air, into commuters. This plan asks a different question. What if the tunnel didn't waste that heat? What if it banked it?
All been that person standing on the subway platform, drenched in sweat in the middle of summer, waiting for our train. But the city is looking at a way to capture that heat from the subway platform, store it, and then use it to heat city buildings in the winter. It's called a thermal energy network, and it would be used for the very first time in the United States on a transit system. The mayor and MTA chair, Janno Lieber, announcing today that they are launching a study that will look at if this type of technology will even work in the subway system, starting first with the Brooklyn Bridge and Chambers Street station.
Here's how it's supposed to work. Crews would drill geothermal boreholes underneath the station, 500 to 600 feet down. Heat pumps and radiant cooling technology would pull thermal energy off the platform and push it into those boreholes where it's stored underground. Then, in winter, that stored heat gets pulled back up and piped into nearby buildings, starting potentially with the David Dinkins Municipal building next door. Mamdani says heating that single building costs the city roughly $1.4 million every winter. Replace even part of that with recycled subway heat, and that's real money.
To do so, we would capture heat in boreholes that would run 500 to 600 feet underground and install a system of circulating pumps and pipes that will use the heat from below our city's surface to warm the offices where our municipal workers are hard at work, powering this incredible city. This would be the first thermal energy system of its kind in any American transit system, a historic feat that would not only help the city to save money and limit steam consumption, but help us mitigate the extreme level of heat in our subway stations. Through both the renovations and the thermal energy network, we would be making these stations cool again. And we'd be making what is old new again.
Sounds elegant, but will it actually work at the scale of an entire subway complex? Nobody knows yet. That's the whole point of the study. And that brings us to the number officials would rather you not focus on too closely: $800,000. That's the entire budget for this study, for drilling test wells, running the numbers, figuring out if this is even physically possible. It is not the cost of building the system. It's the cost of finding out whether building it makes sense at all.
Great service behind you with Marcia Kramer of CBS 2. Marcia.
Janno, I know that it's going to cost about $800,000 to do a pilot study. How much would it cost to expand this to all the subway stations if it turns out to be a workable thing? And the second thing is, how much would you save in terms of energy costs if you could heat all the municipal buildings down here?
Well, I don't think you're looking for a second career, but I would say you asked all the right questions.
If the study succeeds, design work could begin in 2027. Construction, the part that would actually change what your commute feels like, is not funded, not scheduled, and does not exist yet. Anyone telling you New York is installing subway heat recycling this year is telling you something that hasn't happened.
Hi, Mayor. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. I did just have one quick on topic about the heat plan. If this is starting in 2027 for the feasibility study, realistically, how long do you think that study is going to take? And when exactly would this all go into effect, when people could actually feel a difference on the platforms? And then I do have a second off topic.
So we are actually aiming to confirm the geothermal feasibility by the end of this calendar year. And if it is found that it can be implemented, then the design work would begin early next year.
And do you know how long that will take, the design work? Is there a timeline for that process?
I think a lot of that depends on what the findings are of the study, as Chair Lieber shared.
Janno, I know that it's going to cost about $800,000 to do a pilot study. How much would it cost to expand this to all the subway stations if it turns out to be a workable thing? And the second thing is, how much would you save in terms of energy costs if you could heat all the municipal buildings down here?
So where's that $800,000 actually coming from? And why is it tied to congestion pricing? Because the whole Chambers Street renovation this study is riding alongside is funded by toll revenue from Manhattan's congestion pricing zone. That program brought in over $560 million in net revenue in its first year alone, enough for the MTA to move forward on a $68 billion 5-year capital plan. And that money almost didn't survive. The Trump administration spent over a year in court trying to kill congestion pricing outright. A federal judge upheld it in March, which means every dollar funding this heat study survived a fight in Washington before it ever reached Chambers Street.
A federal judge has ruled against the Trump administration's efforts to end congestion pricing. The ruling considered a major victory for Governor Hochul and New York State. Congestion pricing started in January 2025. The judge called attempts to terminate it unlawful. Drivers entering Midtown below 60th Street pay a $9 toll during peak hours on weekdays. The program is a first of its kind in the U.S. In a statement, Governor Hochul said congestion pricing created reduced gridlock, faster trips, safer streets, and cleaner airs. She says it's legal, it works, and it's here to stay.
Now zoom out. If this works at one station, does it work everywhere? Not automatically. The MTA already floated similar cooling technology last year for two of the system's deepest, hottest stops, 168th and 181st Street up in Washington Heights, aiming to bring platforms down into the low 80s. But every station is different. Different depth, different geology, different space to drill, different buildings next door that might actually want the heat. Chambers Street succeeding proves almost nothing about whether a station 40 feet under Midtown could ever do the same thing.
Live look outside as most of us head to the 90-degree mark and a little bit above. We're at 82 degrees right now, so we have some ways to go. But if you're headed below the ground to jump on a subway and you think, oh, it's going to be cool and refreshing, well, you don't know New York.
You're about to find out. That's right. You know, Lindsay Tuckman, we've been having a long discussion about this. You're at the desk now because I think this is something that resonates with so many people that ride this subway, and you try to figure out what's the most miserable subway station. You did some research.
What's the best of the worst, or the worst of the best? I don't know.
Exactly.
Because every New Yorker knows.
And this isn't just a New York experiment. 6 states have now passed laws allowing or requiring utilities to test thermal energy networks. In Framingham, Massachusetts, a $15 million utility-built geothermal network is already heating and cooling 3 dozen homes and businesses off a single shared well field. New York State itself already has roughly 9 similar pilots moving through engineering. The subway version would be new. The underlying idea is not.
It promises to heat and cool 37 buildings and around 140 customers by tapping into geothermal energy. This morning, Congressman Jake Auchincloss and Democratic Whip Catherine Clark were out in Framingham getting a look at Eversource's geothermal pilot project, which is scheduled to be up and running by the end of this year.
It is going to be great for consumers and bring down the cost of electricity.
It just demonstrates that a transition to a clean energy future goes hand in hand with good jobs and lower costs.
We first told you about this groundbreaking project more than a year ago. It requires drilling nearly 90 holes, 600 to 700 feet in the ground, networking those 140 customers here in Framingham into a loop.
So here's where that leaves us. Back on that platform at Brooklyn Bridge City Hall, in 96-degree heat, waiting for a train that's about to blow another wave of hot air across the platform. For a century, that heat was just misery, a problem with no plan attached to it. Now, for the first time, someone is asking whether it's actually worth something. But asking is not proving. An $800,000 study is not a finished system. A press conference is not a subway platform that's 20 degrees cooler. The real question this story leaves you with isn't whether trapping subway heat is a clever idea. It clearly is. The real question is whether New York can turn that idea into something that actually changes your commute, or whether it ends up as another expensive, well-publicized proof of concept that never leaves the lab.
All right, thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have today.
So long, sir.
So tell me, would you rather the city spend money on straightforward air conditioning for subway platforms right now, or spend it testing something that could cool the platforms and cut building heating costs for decades? If it actually works, drop your answer in the comments. And if this broke down what's actually happening versus what's just been promised, hit subscribe. We track stories like this from the announcement all the way to the end.